The wind moved like a ghost through the Wyoming Badlands, carrying dust and old secrets down the long trail that led to Birch Creek. It was the kind of country that burned the skin by day and froze the bones by night, a land where silence was older than men, and justice came on horseback. Folks around there used to talk about a man who could split a hawk's eye at 300 yards, though none could say if he was still alive. Some said he lived quiet up by the frozen creek. Others said he'd hung up his rifle and let the mountains keep his name. But legends, like echoes, never really die out here. Birch Creek was a small scatter of buildings crouched between sandstone ridges, a saloon, a trading post, a weather-beaten church, and a handful of cabins standing like lost teeth in the snow. Smoke crawled from chimneys, dogs barked at strangers, wagons groaned through ruts carved deep by years of winter and want. It wasn't much of a town, just a place where drifters came to trade furs, miners came to drink, and dreamers came to forget. That morning, the creek behind the settlement was locked under ice. Traps lay half-buried, their chains stiff as iron roots. A man worked there alone, tall, broad-shouldered, hair gone gray beneath a fur hat. His coat was worn thin, patched with buckskin. His name was Ethan Cole. He moved with the kind of quiet that made animals pause before running, a rhythm too calm for a man who'd lived by the gun. He checked his snares, lifted a fox from one, and whispered a word of apology before setting it in his pack. Ethan had lived alone for near 10 winters. His cabin sat at the edge of the pines, built of rough logs and silence. Inside hung a few things that didn't belong to any trapper: a rusted Union rifle, a cracked telescope scope, and a small wooden box that stayed locked. When the wind rattled his window, he'd sometimes look toward it and mutter as if speaking to someone unseen. The townsfolk noticed, but no one asked questions. At the trading post, folks kept their distance when Ethan came to town. He wasn't unfriendly, just distant. The kind of man whose eyes didn't wander, they measured. He'd nod to old Sam, the storekeeper, drop a bundle of pelts on the counter, and take coffee, salt, or powder in return. Sometimes he'd linger near the stove, staring at the fire, listening to others talk, but never adding a word. When he did speak, his voice was low and even, a river too deep to see the bottom. That was how it had been for years, until the day the Rourke gang rode in. It was late afternoon when they came down from the mesa, 4 riders in long coats, their horses thin and mean, the sun catching the iron on their belts. The leader, Clay Rourke, was a tall man with a scar that cut across his cheek like a red canyon. He was known across counties, a gambler, a thief, and a man who smiled when others bled. With him rode his brother Jesse, young and wild-eyed, a mountain of a man named Crowder who chewed tobacco and never laughed, and Slim Tate, a wiry drifter who bragged about killing more men than he could count. The town quieted when they arrived. Horses snorted, doors shut. Clay Rourke dismounted slow, looking around with the confidence of a wolf entering a pen of sheep. "Birch Creek," he said with a grin. "Smells like fear and bad whiskey." He pushed through the door of the trading post, spurs ringing. Old Sam stiffened behind the counter. Ethan was already there, counting powder tins. Well, Clay said, noticing the trapper. "Didn't know this place had wildlife." Ethan didn't answer. Clay leaned closer, peering at the stack of pelts on the counter. "These yours, old-timer?" Ethan gave a slow nod. "They're mine now," Clay said, and in one smooth motion, swept them off the counter into his own saddlebag. Laughter followed from his men. Sam started to protest, but Clay's hand dropped to his revolver. "You got a problem, shopkeep?" The store fell silent. Ethan's hand tightened around his mug of coffee, but he didn't move. He stood there, still as stone, staring at the stolen pelts on the floor. Clay turned to him. "You deaf, trapper? Or just scared?" Ethan set the mug down. "Ain't worth dying over." His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made even the stove crackle quieter. Clay laughed. "That's what I thought. Old men talk big till someone looks him in the eye." He kicked open the door and strutted out. The gang followed, laughing, spitting in the snow. Ethan picked up his hat, placed it on his head, and turned to leave. But before he stepped out, the sheriff came in, a young man named Burke, hat in hand, eyes wide. "Ethan," he whispered, "you okay?" You let him take your pelts. Ethan paused at the door. Sheriff, he said quietly, you want to keep your town standing. Let him ride through. Wolves get bored when nobody runs. Burke looked confused, but something in the trapper's gaze made him step aside. There was no anger there, just that same cold stillness the mountains wore after a storm. Ethan walked out into the fading light. The outlaws were at the saloon now, tying their horses, already laughing about the quiet old trapper. Their voices echoed across the street, mocking, crude. From the corner window of the trading post, old Sam watched Ethan pause by the hitching post. The trapper turned his head slightly, eyes catching the last gold light of the setting sun. There was a glint there, faint but sharp, like a blade catching fire. Sam felt it deep in his gut. That look wasn't anger. It was memory. That night, Birch Creek went still early. The outlaws drank till the lamps burned low, breaking bottles and singing off-key songs. Somewhere beyond town, a coyote howled. Up in the hills, Ethan's cabin glowed dim behind the frosted glass. Inside, he sat at the table, oil lamp burning soft. The wooden box lay open for the first time in years. Inside rested a long, polished rifle, walnut stock, brass inlay, the kind of weapon no man carried unless he'd earned it. Alongside it lay a silver medal, tarnished by time, stamped with a single word, Sharps. Ethan lifted the rifle, ran a cloth down its barrel, then looked toward the window where the moon hung over the pines. His reflection stared back at him, older, lonelier, but not broken. He whispered something only the night could hear. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a promise. The camera drifted across his cabin, the pelts drying, the rifle leaning by the door, the medals untouched on the wall. Then it lingered on the man sitting alone, the weight of his past heavy but steady in his hands. Down in Birch Creek, the laughter of the roared gang carried faintly through the cold. But above it all, the wind kept its own song, a long, low whistle that sounded almost like the breath before a rifle shot. And somewhere in that wind, the legend stirred again, of a quiet trapper who once could drop a man at 300 yards without a miss. By the second day, Birch Creek no longer felt like a town. It felt like a place under occupation. The Roar gang had made the saloon their throne room, and everyone else their audience. They drank loud, laughed louder, and made sure no one forgot who held the reins. Clay Rourke sat near the window, boots up on a table, smoke curling from a cigar as he watched the street outside like a hawk waiting for movement. His men Jesse, Slim, and Crowder spread through town in shifts, trading fear for entertainment. The preacher was the first to suffer their games. Reverend Hale, a man as thin as a rail and kind as spring rain, had come out of the church with a bucket of water to clean the steps. Jesse rode by, knocked it over with his boot, and laughed. "Water's for baptizing sinners, preacher," he said. "Ain't no sinners left worth saving." When Hale bent to pick the bucket up, Slim tossed a coin in it. "That's for the sermon," he sneered. "Buy yourself a backbone." Inside the saloon, the air was thick with smoke and nervous laughter. The piano stayed silent. The player had fled town. The barkeep poured whiskey with trembling hands. No one looked the outlaws in the eye. They mocked, insulted, and wagered over who could hit a whiskey bottle with their pistols from across the room. Slim missed twice, Crowder once. Clay didn't miss. He never did. The bottle shattered near the bar, shards flying like splinters of fear. Ethan Cole came in that afternoon, same as he always did, quiet, polite, carrying the weariness of men who don't owe the world an explanation. He ordered coffee, not whiskey, sat at the far corner table, hat low, eyes on the steam rising from his cup. To anyone else, he was just a trapper tired of noise. To Clay Rourke, he was unfinished business, the man who hadn't fought back. "Well, look who's crawled in," Clay said loud enough for everyone to hear. He rose, boots clanging against the floor, and strode over. The ghost hunter himself. Ethan didn't look up. "Don't know what you mean." Clay smiled, leaning close. "You know damn well what I mean. You walk like a man who's seen too much, but I reckon you ain't seen your reflection lately. Just an old ghost in a coat." Jesse laughed from the bar. "Ain't that the truth? Probably couldn't hit a barn if it begged him." The saloon chuckled nervously. Ethan lifted the cup, sipped once, set it down with a steady hand. "You boys looking for trouble, or just attention?" Clay's grin widened. "You think we're here for either? We're here for fun." He reached over and tipped the coffee cup onto the floor. It fell, shattered, black liquid pooling near Ethan's boots. The silence that followed was thick as fog. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "You've had your laugh," he said quietly. Clay leaned in. "You gonna do something about it, old man?" Ethan stood, slow as dawn, and looked at him. There was no rage in his eyes, only the kind of stillness that came before storms. The saloon door creaked as the wind pressed against it. Then Ethan turned and walked out. Clay laughed, a hard, echoing sound that followed him into the street. "Didn't think so." That night, the gang made Birch Creek their playground. They fired pistols into the air, chased horses through the mud, and dared the sheriff to stop them. Burke, young and scared, stood on the boardwalk with his hand hovering near his holster, but never drawing. The preacher tried once, stepping into the street with his Bible raised, and Crowder struck him down with the back of his hand. No one helped him up. Morning came with gray light and the smell of cold ashes. Ethan was back at the trading post, quietly handing over another small bundle of pelts. Tommy, Sam's 12-year-old boy, was sweeping near the door, glancing out toward the saloon with every nervous sound. "They ain't gone yet," he whispered. Ethan gave a small nod. "They'll move on when they run out of laughter." But laughter came easy to men like Clay Rourke. By noon, they were drunk again, firing shots into the sky and pretending they owned the sun. When Tommy carried a sack of feed across the street, Slim Tate stumbled into him, spilling it. Grain scattered everywhere. Slim cursed, grabbed the boy by the arm, and shoved him hard enough to make him fall. The sack tore open, and seed poured into the dust. "Watch where you're going, you little rat," Slim growled. The boy's eyes welled with tears. "I'm sorry, mister." Ethan was already halfway out the door. His boots hit the street before he even realized he'd moved. "That's enough," he said, his voice flat and quiet. Slim turned, sneering. Didn't think the ghost could talk. Ethan walked toward him, slow and deliberate, the way a mountain moves before it falls. He knelt, helped Tommy up, brushed dust from his shirt, and looked at Slim. "You hit a man your size next time." Clay stepped out of the saloon, hand resting easy on his gun. "You planning to teach manners today, Trapper?" Ethan's gaze stayed on the boy. "No, just decency." The street froze. Everyone watched. The sheriff's hand twitched again near his holster, then dropped. Clay's grin stretched, wide and cruel. "Why don't you show us how it's done then, Mr. Decency? Word is you used to be somebody. A soldier, maybe? A killer." Ethan straightened slowly, eyes hard now. "Wasn't much of either." "Then maybe you're nothing at all," Clay said. Slim chuckled. "He's a legend with no story." Ethan's lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Stories are for folks who live long enough to tell them." Jesse spat. "Old man's talking riddles." Ethan put a hand on Tommy's shoulder and started walking him toward the store. Clay called after him. "You gonna walk away again? That all you know how to do?" Ethan didn't turn. "Better than what you're doing." Clay's pistol came up an inch, not to fire, but to threaten, to humiliate. "You sure about that?" Ethan looked over his shoulder then, just once. The air seemed to hold its breath. "I'm sure enough." He kept walking. The boy clung to his coat. The sheriff said nothing. No one did. When the door shut behind them, Clay holstered his gun and laughed, shaking his head. "He's finished," he said. "Whatever he was, he's just bones now." But inside the store, behind drawn curtains, Ethan's hands trembled as he poured Tommy a drink of water. The boy looked up, eyes wide. "You could have fought him," he said. Ethan crouched down, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Son, fighting's easy. It's what comes after that costs you." Tommy frowned. "You scared of them?" Ethan hesitated. "I'm scared of remembering what it's like not to miss." The boy didn't understand. He didn't have to. As the day dragged on, the town shrank into itself. Doors locked early. Curtains closed. The laughter from the saloon grew uglier, fueled by whiskey and boredom. Ethan stood by the window in Sam's store, watching the sun bleed out behind the ridges. He saw Clay toss a coin into the mud and make the preacher crawl for it. He saw the sheriff pretend not to see. He saw the sky turn red like it did years ago on another field with another war. In his mind, flashes came, not memories, but fragments burned too deep to fade. The crack of rifles, men screaming his name, Cole. The long eye, the cold calm of a finger tightening on a trigger. The sight of a gray coat falling through smoke. And later, the letter he'd never forget, killed in action. Your son Thomas Cole, age 17. The sky that night was the color of gunmetal, heavy with the promise of rain. Wind slid cold through the canyon, curling through pine and stone like something alive. Far below, the mail coach rattled along the trail, its lantern swinging with each turn. The two mules strained against their harness, breath steaming in the chill. The driver kept glancing at the ridges. He'd heard the stories, same as everyone. The Roar gang had been sighted near Black Hollow, and only fools traveled under that shadow. Ethan Cole was no fool. He lay prone on the ridge above, wrapped in his duster, rifle cradled against his chest. Through his brass scope, the world below looked small, fragile, and doomed. He could see the coach, the guard with the shotgun, the long sweep of canyon road, and beyond that, the silhouettes of 4 riders waiting in the dark. Clay Rourke and his men, wolves in human skin. The wind shifted, carrying their voices up the slope. 2 men and a sack of mail. Jesse's voice, thin and eager. Easy pickings. Clay's reply came slow, cruel. Shoot first, then pick the easy part. Ethan's finger rested near the trigger. The old rifle felt like an extension of his heartbeat, steady, precise, unflinching. In the scope, Clay's scar glinted faintly as he leaned forward on his horse. 1 breath. 1 pull. That's all it would take. But Ethan didn't pull. He exhaled and lowered the barrel. Not yet. Not without reason. Justice had to show itself before judgment did. Down below, the coach came into view of the ambush. A crack split the night. The guard fell before he could lift his gun. The driver shouted, whipping the reins, but a second shot shattered the lantern, plunging everything into chaos. Mule screamed. The coach skidded sideways, one wheel breaking loose on the rocks. Ethan's jaw tightened. He watched the guard's body tumble, watched the driver slump, a crimson stain spreading across his coat. Clay and his men hooped, riding in close, laughing as they tore open the rear door and dragged out the mail sacks. Ethan's hands clenched around the rifle. His breath came slow, measured. Every instinct screamed to end it. But he waited. The rain began, thin needles first, then sheets that blurred the canyon into smoke. He slid backward off the ridge, moving through pine shadows like part of the wind itself. His boots made no sound. His rifle was slung across his back now, hands free. He moved by memory, every rock, every tree, every bend of the land known to him like the lines on his palm. Below, the gang's laughter drifted upward. We'll hole up in the gulch. Clay barked. Sort to take when it clears. They herded the mules aside and dragged the bodies off the road, uncaring. One of them, Slim, kicked a fallen guard and spat. Told you Birch Creek was soft country. The storm deepened. Lightning flashed over the peaks. The smell of wet sage filled the air. Ethan reached the slope above their camp, crouched low, and set to work. He moved like a craftsman, deliberate, methodical. A length of wire here. A loop snare between 2 roots. Stones piled to fall with a single tug. He cut loose 3 of their horses and whispered into the dark. Run. The animals bolted, hooves echoing down the canyon, their panic masking his movement. Crowder, half drunk, stumbled after them. Damn horses spooked. Slim cursed. Probably lightning, you ox. But lightning didn't leave tracks in mud. Ethan ghosted closer, soaked to the bone but calm. He saw the outlaws huddled by their small fire, their laughter dimming under the weight of the storm. Their eyes darted toward the cliffs, uneasy. A branch snapped. Crowder turned. You hear that? Jesse chuckled nervously. Wind. Then came the sound of metal whispering against stone. Just once, faint and clear. Crowder spun toward it, shotgun raised. The flash of lightning revealed an empty ridge. Nothing but pines. He stepped forward anyway. The wire caught his ankle. He didn't even have time to shout before the ground gave way beneath him, the snare yanking him upside down. His shotgun flew, discharging into the air. The blast echoed through the canyon like thunder. "Crowder!" Slim shouted, scrambling up. "Where the hell?" A single rifle shot cracked the night. It wasn't thunder this time. Slim froze mid-step, eyes wide. Then he dropped, his hat spinning off into the mud. Jesse screamed, pulling his gun and firing wildly at shadows. "He's up there! He's up there!" Clay ducked behind a rock, snarling. "Shut your damn mouth and find him." Lightning illuminated the canyon again, brief and brutal. The ridges, the fire, the bodies, and up on the slope, just for an instant, the shape of a man kneeling steady, rifle braced across his knee, rain streaming from the brim of his hat. Clay's stomach twisted. "Cole," he hissed. Ethan vanished into the dark. Jesse's hands shook as he reloaded. "We gotta go, Clay. He's picking us off." "Shut up," Clay barked. "He's just one man." But the canyon answered with silence. Another shot tore through the downpour, hitting the ground near Jesse's boot. He screamed and scrambled behind a log, breathing hard. The wind howled through the gorge like a choir of ghosts. Ethan moved with the rhythm of the storm, appearing, vanishing, never in the same place twice. His old training came back with terrifying ease. The distance between heartbeats, the way sound bent around rain, how to breathe between flashes of lightning. He saw Jesse crouched behind the log, pistol trembling. The boy couldn't have been more than 20. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. The face reminded him of his son. Same reckless eyes, same hunger for glory that never lasted long enough to mean anything. He shifted aim, fired at the log instead. The shot splintered it, sent Jesse scrambling toward the horses. The young outlaw mounted, whipping his reins, desperate to escape. But the horse's reins caught on a low branch Ethan had rigged, jerking the animal sideways. It reared, throwing Jesse into the mud. The boy groaned, dazed, reaching for his pistol. Another shadow passed over him. Ethan was already gone, melting back into the rain. Clay ran to him, grabbing his collar. "Get up, damn you. He's everywhere." Jesse gasped. "We gotta go, Clay. He ain't human." Clay slapped him hard. "He's just a man with a gun." A voice rolled down from the ridge then, carried by the wind, low and steady as thunder over hills. "You already woke the dead, Rourke. Now answer for him." The sound stopped everything. Even the rain seemed to pause between drops. Clay's breath came ragged. "You think you can scare me, old man?" he shouted into the canyon. "You think hiding in shadows makes you a god?" The echo came back hollow, mocking. A god. It was Ethan's voice, soft but vast. "No, just the man who remembers what you forgot." Then the night exploded. Rifle fire answered pistol fire, flashes lighting the cliffs. Clay and Jesse fired into the dark, their bullets chewing bark and stone. Ethan's shots came measured, deliberate, each one closer than the last. Jesse tried to run. A shot hit the rock beside his head, showering him with shards. He screamed, fell to his knees. "Please, don't." Another crack, and he slumped forward. Clay stood alone now, soaked and shaking, pistol nearly empty. "You want me?" he bellowed. "Come and take me, Cole." Lightning flashed again, and for one heartbeat, he saw Ethan standing across the clearing. Long coat soaked, rifle steady, eyes like cold iron. Then darkness returned. Clay fired into it, again and again, until the hammer clicked on empty chambers. Nothing answered but rain. By dawn, the storm had crawled east, leaving the world washed clean and quiet. The sky above Birch Creek was pale gold, streaked with smoke-colored clouds. The wind had fallen still, and the only sound left was the slow creak of a saddle. One horse limping along the ridge, one man slumped in the seat. Clay Rourke's coat was torn, his face cut by branches and rage. His hands trembled from cold and loss. Every shadow in the trees looked like a ghost of the man he'd buried in the night. He followed the faint trail through the pines, drawn by the thin thread of smoke curling above the valley. It led him to a small cabin near the frozen creek, a lonely place with a wooden porch and a single lamp still burning inside. He dismounted clumsily, boots sinking into the half-frozen mud, and staggered to the door. His knuckles rapped weakly against it. It opened before the second knock. Ethan Cole stood there, clean-shaven, coat buttoned, as if the night storm had never touched him. The rifle leaned against the wall behind him. On the table inside, a pot of coffee steamed beside 2 tin cups. His voice came even, calm. "You look cold." Clay stared at him, breathing hard. You planned this." "Didn't plan much," Ethan said. "Just waited." He stepped aside. Clay hesitated, then stumbled in. The warmth hit him first, then the smell, wood smoke, coffee, pine pitch. He dropped into the chair opposite the table, eyes darting toward the rifle. Ethan poured coffee into both cups, set one in front of him. "You lost your men." Clay's jaw clenched. "You killed them." "They made their choices," Ethan replied. "Same as you." Clay drank greedily, the hot liquid burning his throat. He grimaced. "You could have let me go." "I did," Ethan said softly. "Twice." Silence thickened between them. Clay stared at his reflection in the dark coffee, then looked up, eyes hollow. "You ain't just some trapper. Who the hell are you?" Ethan's gaze drifted toward the old rifle resting against the wall. "Once upon a time," he said, "I was a soldier, long before Birch Creek. They called me Ghost Eye." Clay blinked. "Ghost Eye." Ethan nodded slowly. "Antietam. Sharpshooter Corps. Some fool officer gave me the name. Said I could see farther than God." Clay let out a broken laugh. "Ghost Eye was killed in the war." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's what I wanted them to believe." "Why?" Clay rasped. "Because I'd already seen enough killing to last 2 lifetimes," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. "I walked away. Came here. Figured the world could go on without me." Clay leaned forward, shaking his head. "So you hid. Lived like some mountain ghost, while men like me ran free." Ethan didn't flinch. "You're not free, Clay. You've just never stopped running." Clay's hands trembled. He looked down at them as if seeing them for the first time. Scarred, dirty, stained. "You don't know me," he whispered. "You don't know what I've done." "I can guess. I killed men for sport," Clay said suddenly, voice cracking. "Watched their faces when they realized they'd lost. Watched the light go out. You ever see that light?" Ethan's eyes darkened. "Too many times." Clay slammed the cup down. "Then don't you judge me." Ethan's tone stayed calm. "Not judging. Just saying. You finally ran out of range." Clay froze. The words hit him harder than any bullet. His breath came short, ragged. He stood slowly, staring at Ethan like a cornered wolf. "Then finish it. You gonna kill me. Do it clean." Ethan stood too, tall and still, the dawn light spilling through the window across his face. "I ain't killing a man who's already dead inside," he said quietly. "But I won't stop you if you need to settle it." He reached behind the door, pulled out a revolver, and placed it on the table between them. 6 shots. Your call." Clay stared at it, disbelief and fear warring in his eyes. "You're giving me a gun?" Ethan nodded. "You said you wanted to fight. Might as well make it fair." Clay picked up the revolver, his hand trembling. "You got a death wish, old man." Ethan opened the door. The first light of morning spilled in, catching the mist rising from the creek. "No," he said. "Just a wish for quiet." They stepped outside. The air was sharp and cold, the earth still damp from rain. Crows watched from the trees, black eyes glinting. Ethan walked out into the open field, his rifle cradled loosely in his arm, and turned. Clay followed 10 paces behind, the revolver heavy in his hand. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind sighing through the pines and the faint crackle of thawing ice. Ethan looked across the distance between them. "You sure about this?" Clay sneered. "You don't get to ask questions now." He raised the revolver with both hands, lined up the sights. The sun crested the ridge, a thin blade of gold cutting through the mist. Clay fired first. The shot went wide, tearing bark from a tree behind Ethan. His hand shook. He cursed, fired again, missed. The echo rolled through the valley like thunder. Ethan didn't move. He took one slow breath, lifted his rifle, and let it rest against a shoulder. His finger tightened gently, almost lovingly, against the trigger. The shot cracked once. Clay staggered, eyes wide, the revolver slipping from his grasp. He stumbled backward, knees hitting the wet earth. The sound of the creek swallowed his last breath. Ethan lowered the rifle and stood still for a long time. The smoke from the barrel rose in a thin, ghostly thread that curled into the dawn. He walked over slowly, crouched beside the fallen man. Clay's eyes were open, staring at the sky, unblinking. Ethan reached down, closed them with his thumb. "You should have gone north," he murmured. The wind stirred again, soft and sorrowful. By the time the sun climbed high, Ethan had buried him by the ridge under a cairn of stones. No name, no marker, just silence. Then he gathered the gang's horses, tied them loose near the trail, and turned them toward town. Birch Creek woke to the sight of riderless horses wandering in from the fog. One of them carried a bullet hole through the saddle. The sheriff found the first body near the canyon, the second by the river bend, the third half buried in mud. Each shot was clean, deliberate, one bullet each. A marksman's signature. By the time Burke reached Ethan's cabin, the old man was gone. The door was open, the fire cold. On the table lay a single folded paper, weighted by a spent cartridge. It read, "Tell the boy to be kind. That's all that matters." Weeks passed, then months. Birch Creek healed slow, as frontier towns do, by pretending. The preacher went back to his sermons, the saloon to its music, the store to its quiet trade. Folks spoke less about the Rourke gang and more about the peace that followed. One autumn afternoon, a traveler rode through. He was young, curious, a writer from back east chasing stories of gunmen and ghosts. He stopped by the blacksmith's forge and asked, "You ever hear of a man they called the Quiet Trapper? Said he could hit a target 300 yards out." The blacksmith wiped his hands on a rag, nodded toward the creek. "You're looking for Ethan Cole. Where's he live?" The blacksmith's hammer paused midair. "He don't." He pointed to a small rise beyond the pines, where the creek bent toward the open valley. A wooden cross stood there, plain and unadorned. The wind moved through the grass around it like a whisper. The traveler removed his hat. He was a gunman? The blacksmith smiled faintly. He was a man who learned when not to be one.